Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a time where the value of a name has become more important than the weight of a legacy. We are watching leaders rise, not because they have served, but because they have been seen. And in that climate, when a man demands the Nobel Peace Prize, the world should be shocked, not just at the audacity of the request, but at what it reveals about the deeper sickness of our time. We have confused titles with testimony. We have replaced purpose with position, and we've started to believe that the appearance of peace is the same thing as the presence of peace. That is not just political misdirection, that is spiritual deception. See, you can sign all the treaties you want, but if your heart is full of pride, division, or self-glory, you're not building peace. You're building a platform. The Nobel Peace Prize was never meant to reward negotiated deals. It was meant to celebrate transformational healing. It was never just about what you did. It was about why you did it and how it changed the world for good. Demanding recognition doesn't mean you deserve it, and desiring applause is not the same as delivering impact. When a leader asks the world to give him peace honors, we ought to ask a different question. Has he given peace to the people he led? Has he brought calm to conflict? Has he planted unity where there was division? Or did he just make a deal, get a photo op, and look for a trophy? My Bible tells me that blessed are the peacemakers, not the peace talkers, not the peace dealers, not the peace demanders, but the peacemakers, those who build bridges not for their own names to be exalted, but for others to walk across into healing. And let's be honest, this isn't just about one man, this is about all of us. This is about a culture that has taught people to chase medals instead of meaning, to fight for fame instead of faithfulness, to seek the high places while avoiding the low road of service. The world is shocked because the mask came off. But if we're honest, we've been building this system for a long time. Now, let me talk to your soul for a second. If you're living for the applause, you'll die when the clapping stops. If you're chasing the trophy, you'll miss the truth. Real peace doesn't come from politics. It doesn't come from platforms. It doesn't come from global summits or golden plaques. Real peace comes from a heart transformed by truth and humbled by grace. We need leaders who don't ask for awards. They ask for accountability. We need influencers who don't crave attention. They crave integrity. We need men and women who know that their worth doesn't come from headlines, but from the hand of God. In recent years, former President Donald Trump has made several statements that sparked global controversy, but few were as bold and polarizing as his demand for recognition through the Nobel Peace Prize. This demand raised eyebrows not only in political circles, but also among the general public, sparking intense debate around what the prize represents, who deserves it, and how modern-day leaders view recognition. At the core of Trump's declaration lies a deeper issue, the human desire for acknowledgement and validation, especially from institutions that have historically symbolized peace, diplomacy, and global impact. Trump's assertion wasn't merely a political stunt. It reflected his belief that his administration's efforts, particularly in foreign policy and peace agreements like the Abraham Accords, were worthy of high-level global recognition. Whether one agrees or disagrees, the statement forces us to confront the underlying question: what truly qualifies a person for the Nobel Peace Prize in today's world? Trump's claim that he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize wasn't made in isolation. It followed his administration's involvement in several diplomatic breakthroughs in the Middle East, most notably brokering normalization deals between Israel and several Arab nations. While critics argue these deals were transactional and motivated by political gain, supporters view them as significant steps toward peace in a historically volatile region. Trump himself highlighted the irony of receiving little to no mainstream media coverage for these agreements, in contrast to past recipients who were awarded the prize under more symbolic circumstances. This frustration appeared to fuel his demand, drawing attention to what he saw as a media and global establishment unwilling to acknowledge his achievements simply because of political bias or personality-driven opposition. Yet, beneath the controversy is a deeper societal reflection in an age of hyper-visibility and social validation. The hunger for public acknowledgement has become a defining trait of leadership. For Trump, the Nobel Prize represented more than a trophy. It was a stamp of legitimacy from the global elite, a formal acknowledgement that his unconventional and often combative political approach had produced tangible results. This moment is not just about Trump, though. It invites a broader discussion about recognition, legacy, and how we judge impact in a politically divided world. In previous decades, the Nobel Peace Prize was largely awarded to figures who embodied diplomacy, restraint, and moral high ground. The notion that someone as divisive and unapologetically brash as Trump would be a candidate challenges the traditional narrative, raising questions about whether the criteria for peace itself has shifted. From a psychological perspective, Trump's insistence on receiving the Nobel Prize can be seen as an extension of his leadership style, transactional, results-oriented, and obsessed with branding and perception. Unlike leaders who let history judge their legacy quietly, Trump has always been direct about what he believes he deserves. This boldness, while offensive to some, resonates deeply with those who view the modern world as increasingly hypocritical, where true results often go unrecognized in favor of curated public images. In this context, Trump's statement is more than self-glorification. It's a critique of a system that many believe rewards symbolism over substance. The world's shocked response to Trump's demand says as much about global expectations as it does about Trump himself. There's an inherent tension between how society expects a peace prize were the leader to behave and how Trump chooses to engage with the world. His presidency rewrote the rules of diplomacy, favoring directness over decorum and action over appearance. Whether or not that deserves a Nobel Prize is a matter of perspective, but the mere suggestion has forced people to re-examine what peace means in our era and whether peace achieved through unorthodox means holds the same value as peace pursued through traditional channels. The reaction also highlights a media environment deeply polarized along ideological lines. In some circles, Trump's accomplishments are downplayed or ignored. In others, they are celebrated as revolutionary. This disparity in perception affects not only Trump but all future leaders seeking recognition in a fractured world. The Nobel Prize, once seen as a universal symbol of honor, is now entangled in political narratives that reflect deeper divisions within global society. Certainly, here's a 600-word expansion of Keynote No. 2. The world reacts, shock, confusion, and commentary, without any headings or concluding sentences. when Donald Trump publicly expressed that he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. The reaction from the global community was swift, intense, and deeply divided. On one side, his supporters heralded the statement as justified recognition for what they viewed as groundbreaking diplomatic efforts, while critics saw it as another example of Trump's narcissism and disregard for traditional global standards. The level of shock wasn't merely due to the claim itself, but the audacity and directness with which it was made. In the modern political arena, where leaders often temper their ambitions behind carefully crafted language, Trump's unapologetic demand stood out as both disruptive and revealing. The world, accustomed to diplomacy cloaked in subtlety, was now being asked to evaluate peace through a lens that was brash, loud, and unapologetically transactional. International media outlets quickly picked up the story, offering a mix of satire, critique, and occasional acknowledgement. In Europe, where the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded by a Norwegian committee, the statement was met with visible unease. Editorials questioned whether the prestige of the award was being undermined by the mere suggestion that a polarizing figure like Trump could be associated with it. The idea that peace could be equated with political deals struck under economic or strategic leverage made many uncomfortable. Critics pointed out that peace born from pressure and incentives might not reflect the spirit of reconciliation and mutual understanding the prize was meant to honor. Others, however, conceded that certain achievements such as the Abraham Accords represented genuine diplomatic progress, regardless of how or why they were achieved. In the United States, the reaction split largely along partisan lines. Conservative voices praised Trump for accomplishing what many previous presidents had failed to do, fostering agreements between Israel and several Arab nations. They argued that these accomplishments had measurable impacts on regional stability and deserved recognition on the world stage. Liberal commentators, on the other hand, focused on the inconsistency between Trump's rhetoric and the ideals of peace. They pointed to his often incendiary language, domestic policies that sowed division, and global decisions such as withdrawing from international agreements as reasons he should not even be considered for such an honor. This clash of interpretations not only mirrored the political polarization within the U.S., but also reflected a broader global divide in how leadership is evaluated. Social media amplified the chaos, with hashtags like #Nobel for Trump trending alongside memes mocking the idea. The digital landscape transformed into a battlefield of perspectives, with influencers, analysts, and everyday users weighing in on what peace really means. Some posed serious philosophical questions. Can peace be achieved through strength and confrontation? Should results outweigh methods? Others were more satirical, highlighting the irony of awarding a peace prize to a leader who had frequently engaged in combative language and confrontational diplomacy. The tone of the conversation was emblematic of our era, fast, paced, emotionally charged, and rarely balanced. Even among academics and historians, the reaction was far from unanimous. Some scholars argued that peace has historically come in many forms, and that the Nobel Committee itself has awarded the prize to controversial figures before. They pointed out that leaders like Henry Kissinger and Yasser Arafat had received the award under equally disputed circumstances, suggesting that Trump's claim, while controversial, wasn't entirely outside the bounds of precedent. Others countered by emphasizing the importance of moral integrity and sustained commitment to peace, noting that transactional diplomacy lacked the long-term vision and collaborative spirit the Nobel Peace Prize was meant to represent. The shock, then, wasn't only about Trump's statement. It was about what the statement represented in a changing world. It exposed cracks in the global consensus on leadership, integrity, and what deserves recognition. It revealed how deeply politics has permeated the idea of peace and how varied the global interpretations of leadership success have become. Trump's demand forced a re-examination of the institutions we hold sacred and the standards by which we define achievement in an age where truth, value, and worth are constantly being debated through the filters of ideology and identity. Certainly, here is a 600-word expansion of Keynote No. 3, Who Deserves Recognition, a deeper dive, with no headings or closing sentences. Recognition has always been a powerful force in shaping human behavior, especially in the realm of leadership and influence. From ancient rulers to modern presidents, the need to be seen, validated, and remembered has driven some of the most impactful decisions in history. In the case of Donald Trump's demand for the Nobel Peace Prize, the controversy goes far beyond personal ego or political showmanship. It opens up a much more profound question: who truly deserves recognition in a world where metrics of success are increasingly blurred by bias, ideology, and media narratives? In this deeper dive, the complexity of recognition becomes clearer as we explore not only what leaders achieve, but how and why their efforts are acknowledged, celebrated, or ignored. The Nobel Peace Prize was created to honor individuals or organizations that have made outstanding contributions to the promotion of peace. Over the years, its recipients have included diplomats, activists, reformers, and even those who negotiated peace from within conflict. But the common thread among them has generally been a perception of moral authority, selflessness, and long-term impact. Trump's case challenges that tradition directly. His approach to peace was transactional, pragmatic, and rooted in a business mindset. Instead of appealing to ideology or humanitarian ideals, he brokered agreements through strategic incentives and leveraged relationships, emphasizing results over process. This raises the dilemma: should the outcome of peace be weighted more heavily than the means by which it was achieved? There are many who argue that recognition should be based on effectiveness. Under this lens, Trump's facilitation of the Abraham Accords, which normalized diplomatic relations between Israel and several Arab nations, stands as a significant diplomatic achievement. These agreements, while not perfect, created frameworks for dialogue, trade, and mutual cooperation that had been stalled for decades. Supporters of Trump view this as a valid, measurable success worthy of global acknowledgement. They question why other leaders who made less tangible contributions to peace were recognized while his administration's achievements were largely dismissed or overlooked. However, the counterargument holds weight as well. Critics of Trump contend that recognition, particularly at the level of the Nobel Peace Prize, must be holistic. They emphasize that peace is not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice, dignity, and mutual respect. They highlight that a leader's broader behavior, including domestic policies, tone, rhetoric, and commitment to democratic norms, must also be factored into whether they deserve such recognition. In Trump's case, his critics argue that his divisive language, disregard for traditional alliances, and combative posture toward critics undermine any claim to a peace-building legacy. They question whether one can claim to bring peace abroad while fostering discord at home. Beyond Trump, this debate touches on a global reality. Recognition today is filtered through deeply divided worldviews. In an age where social media drives perception and legacy is shaped by viral moments rather than long-term reflection, who gets honored often reflects popularity, media alignment, and timing as much as actual impact. There is growing skepticism over whether awards like the Nobel Peace Prize still maintain their original purity, or whether they've become politicized symbols caught between tradition and modern expectations. Moreover, recognition in the public sphere has become as much about symbolism as substance. A leader's image, tone, and presentation often determine public perception more than the details of policy or diplomacy. Trump, with his confrontational style and rejection of political correctness, represents a figure who disrupts this expectation. He challenges the traditional archetype of a peace figure, raising uncomfortable questions about whether the criteria for recognition should evolve with the times or hold firm to long-standing ideals. The discussion around who deserves recognition forces a larger cultural reflection. Are we rewarding intention or outcome? Do we value moral leadership more than practical results? Is peace defined by smiling photo ops or by strategic shifts in global relations? These questions have no easy answers, but they are essential as the world continues to redefine what it means to lead, to impact, and to be remembered certainly. Here's a 600-word expansion of Keynote No. 4. Tony Evans starts Identity and Influence with no headings or closing remarks. When Dr. Tony Evans begins to speak, there is a distinct shift in tone, measured, firm, and spiritually grounded. Unlike political rhetoric or media commentary, his message doesn't seek to divide or defend, but to illuminate deeper truths about identity and influence. He doesn't address Trump's claim directly at first, but instead invites listeners to look inward, to examine the foundation upon which we build our sense of self and the impact we have on the world around us. His voice, authoritative yet compassionate, calls for a reorientation from seeking validation through worldly titles to understanding the eternal value of purpose-driven living in a culture obsessed with status, praise, and recognition. Dr. Evans reminds us that identity rooted in God transcends the shifting standards of man-made awards. His message begins with the truth that many people are struggling with today: identity confusion. In a world where social media curates images and public personas, individuals are taught to chase labels and affirmations that often have little to do with who they really are. Dr. Evans confronts this illusion by anchoring identity not in public opinion or professional success, but in divine calling. He speaks about how people, leaders, influencers, even everyday individuals, often operate from a place of insecurity, trying to prove worth through accomplishments and acknowledgement. That insecurity leads many to pursue platforms, prizes, and prestige not as a celebration of purpose, but as compensation for a void they haven't yet dealt with internally. In this light, the conversation around recognition, including Trump's demand for the Nobel Peace Prize, becomes a symptom of a much larger cultural illness. Dr. Evans offers a biblical lens through which to view influence, not as a means to secure applause, but as a responsibility given by God to serve others with integrity. He discusses how real influence doesn't require validation from systems or institutions. When a person understands who they are in Christ, they operate with quiet confidence, knowing their value is not determined by committee decisions, media narratives, or the shifting tides of public approval. Dr. Evans then dives deeper into the concept of divine influence. He emphasizes that influence is not just about reaching large audiences or having global visibility. It's about impact, consistent, character-driven impact. He speaks of people who will never be famous yet change the trajectory of families, communities, and even nations because they walked in obedience and lived out their calling. Through this, he challenges the audience to stop asking, "Who is watching me?" and start asking, "Am I being faithful to what I've been called to do?" This shift in perspective dismantles the anxiety attached to recognition and repositions influence as something spiritual, not just social or political. As he continues, Dr. Evans reflects on the biblical examples of individuals who were overlooked by society but chosen by God. David was ignored by his own family when Samuel came to anoint a king. Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers and later imprisoned, yet ultimately positioned to lead Egypt and save nations. These stories are not just historical, they serve as reminders that divine influence often flows through rejection, not applause. Dr. Evans encourages listeners not to measure their worth by awards, likes, or media attention, but to stay rooted in their identity as children of God. He stresses that when we walk in alignment with that identity, influence is inevitable because it is not forced, it is a result of purpose fulfilled. He addresses the temptation many face, especially those in leadership, to compromise their values for recognition. In doing so, they may gain visibility but lose authenticity. Dr. Evans warns that the more influence you are given, the greater the responsibility to steward it with humility. Influence without identity leads to arrogance, but identity grounded in truth empowers influence that changes lives. He speaks with urgency, knowing that the culture is chasing hollow markers of success, while God is calling people to lead with substance, conviction, and purpose, certainly. Here's a 600-word expansion of Keynote No. 5 lessons we can learn: legacy, humility, and real power, without headings or an ending. Legacy is not built in the headlines of today, but in the quiet echo of actions that continue to influence generations long after the spotlight fades. In a world increasingly obsessed with recognition, speed, and spectacle, we often lose sight of what truly lasts. The discussion surrounding Donald Trump's demand for the Nobel Peace Prize may seem political on the surface, but beneath it lies a far more universal lesson about the nature of legacy, the necessity of humility, and the source of real power. Dr. Tony Evans takes this moment to teach that while awards may be given, legacy is earned, and it is not earned through temporary applause, but through long-term obedience to purpose and values that transcend personal ambition. True legacy, as Dr. Evans explains, is forged not in a single bold moment or statement, but in the consistency of a life lived with intention. It is about character that stands strong in silence as much as in speech. People often confuse recognition with impact, but they are not the same. Recognition is what others give you. Impact is what you leave behind. Recognition may satisfy the ego, but impact satisfies purpose. In this age, people hunger to be seen more than they hunger to be significant. But legacy does not come from how loud you are or how many platforms you command. It comes from the quiet disciplines, the unseen decisions, and the sacrifice that nobody claps for. Dr. Evans urges us to consider the difference between pride and power. The world celebrates pride, confidence, dominance, and status, but real power flows through humility. History has repeatedly shown that the most transformational leaders were not always the most applauded. Many of them were ridiculed, misunderstood, or rejected in their time, but they stayed faithful. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less. It is the awareness that everything we accomplish is bigger than us, that influence is not owned but entrusted. The proud chase recognition for what they did. The humble recognize that even their best work was possible only because of what God allowed. When we look at the legacies of those who left lasting change, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, we see people who did not live for the prize but for the purpose. They were more concerned with people than platforms. They were not perfect, but they carried a humility that kept them grounded. That kind of humility is rare today, and Dr. Evans laments how modern culture increasingly mistakes arrogance for strength. He reminds us that you can be confident without being prideful and powerful without being boastful. Real power is quiet. It builds, it lifts, it heals. This keynote challenges listeners to reconsider what they are building and why. Are we chasing legacy or applause? Are we shaping something that will last beyond us? Or are we just collecting moments of fame that will soon be forgotten? Dr. Evans encourages a shift from self, promotion to service. Legacy is not about how much we are celebrated, but how much we contributed to the lives of others. It's not about how many people follow us, but how many people are changed because of what we stood for. There is also a call to examine the foundations of influence. When influence is rooted in ego, it collapses under pressure. When it is rooted in service, it endures. Many people want the platform, but are not ready for the pressure that comes with it. Many want the prize, but are unwilling to carry the weight of what it represents. Dr. Evans makes it clear that lasting influence cannot be microwaved. It is slow, cooked through obedience, consistency, humility, and a willingness to be overlooked if necessary, as long as the mission continues. Certainly, here's a 600-word expansion of Keynote No. 6. Spiritual reflection, power vs. purpose, written without headings or an ending. In every generation, power seduces those who seek to lead. It promises control, recognition, influence, and the ability to shape narratives. But Dr. Tony Evans makes a sharp distinction between power that is self, serving, and purpose that is God-given. He calls us to reflect deeply on the difference between holding power and walking in purpose, and what happens when we confuse the two. In the context of Donald Trump's controversial demand for the Nobel Peace Prize, the world is again confronted with this age-old question: is it better to be powerful or to be purposeful? Power, when disconnected from divine intent, becomes hollow. It may command attention, but it cannot sustain transformation. Purpose, on the other hand, may not always gain applause, but it builds legacies that align with eternal truth. Dr. Evans doesn't shy away from the complexities of influence. He acknowledges that powerful people can do good things, that imperfect people can accomplish meaningful change, but he warns that when power becomes the goal instead of the tool, it leads to destruction. He draws from Scripture to show how God has always elevated those who aligned their lives with purpose over those who merely sought position. From Moses to Esther, from Paul to Joseph, Influence was granted not because they demanded it, but because they surrendered to it. They were chosen not because they chased recognition, but because they submitted to a divine calling, often at the cost of personal comfort. There's a spiritual danger in confusing influence with identity. When a person believes they are only valuable when they are visible, they begin to prioritize power over character. Dr. Evans speaks to the core of this issue, the temptation to define ourselves by what we accomplish rather than who we become. He makes it clear that true identity is not found in titles, awards, or public platforms. It is found in the quiet assurance of being created with purpose, on purpose, by a God who does not measure us by human standards. Purpose leads to power, but only when the heart is right. Power without purpose is a counterfeit. It offers authority without integrity, reach without responsibility, and influence without accountability. Dr. Evans emphasizes that purpose requires a posture of humility. You can't walk in divine assignment if your heart is full of pride. God cannot bless a platform built on ego. He reminds listeners that there's a spiritual weight to every position of influence. The higher you go, the more you must rely on the foundation beneath you. If that foundation is not purpose, the entire structure will collapse under the weight of public scrutiny, personal temptation, and spiritual emptiness. That's why so many who achieve worldly power still feel unfulfilled. They reached the top but missed their calling. They gained control but lost connection with themselves, with God, and with what truly matters. He speaks directly to the soul's longing for significance. Everyone wants to matter, everyone wants to be known, but Dr. Evans teaches that we were never meant to be known for the sake of fame. We were meant to be known by God and used for His glory. That kind of significance can't be bought, branded, or awarded. It is lived out in obedience, in service, and in courage. It's found in the moments when no one is watching, but you still choose to do what's right because your life is anchored in truth. This spiritual reflection cuts through politics and platforms and speaks to the heart of every listener. Whether you're a leader on a global stage or a parent trying to raise your children with integrity, the message is the same. Don't chase power, live in purpose. Don't measure your worth by applause, measure it by alignment. Dr. Evans reminds us that one day all human recognition will fade. Awards will be forgotten, titles will pass on, influence will shift to someone else. But purpose, when rooted in God's will, outlasts every era, every trend, every name. 2/2 absolutely. Here's a powerful and cohesive conclusion that ties together all 6 keynotes and leaves a lasting impact. In a world increasingly driven by fame, validation, and public recognition, the conversation surrounding Donald Trump's demand for the Nobel Peace Prize reveals far more than a moment of controversy. It exposes the deeper struggle between ego and purpose, between applause and impact. Through each keynote, a truth emerges. True leadership is not defined by titles or trophies, but by the legacy we build, the humility we embody, and the purpose we fulfill. Dr. Tony Evans masterfully redirects our focus from external achievements to internal alignment, reminding us that identity must be rooted in something greater than headlines or history books. As the world reacts with shock and opinion, we are challenged to look beyond the surface, to examine what kind of influence we are cultivating, not just on stages, but in our character, our decisions, and our quiet obedience to something higher. Real power isn't found in demanding recognition, but in living a life so aligned with truth that the impact speaks for itself. When legacy is shaped by humility and driven by purpose, it transcends controversy, outlives applause, and touches eternity.